So here's where we're going with today's interview. I wanted to pose a question, I guess, to my guest, and that is, do trail cameras actually lead to a successful hunt? And setting them up early in the season, patterning the deer, and then having an opportunity for that deer later in the fall. Is that a reliable and a successful way to hunt? And always staying on the same property. That's the other key component here. So, short answer, and I think the answer you're going to get from my next guest is a definitive yes. And on that note, it's a real pleasure for me to welcome Geoff Dorward of Dorward Outdoor Adventures, DOA for short. Geoff, thanks so much for taking time.
Yeah, you bet. Always good to chat with you, Michael. And when we're talking about the outdoors and animals, hey, what could be better than that?
Absolutely. So let's get into it. You and I have talked on camera in the past about the use of trail cameras, how you set them up, where you set them up, that type of thing. Walk us through the story of this particular hunt. And folks, we will post a link to Geoff's story, and you'll have an opportunity to watch it. And boy, do I recommend that you watch it. This is a remarkable story. Anyways, Geoff, talk a little bit about your process in going through and getting everything set up for this.
For sure. So my scouting process, Michael, is almost a year-round process. And it's one of those things that for me starts early in the spring in that shed hunting season, right? When I'm out on the ground early in the spring in March, April, looking for antlers that have shed off. And I find it so much easier to find game trails when they're in the snow and they're frozen in there and you can see what's moving. There's no foliage on the trees. Because as we know, as everything greens up, there could be a trail there and you don't even know it exists, but I know it exists because I've been there in the spring and I see tracks in the snow and whatnot. So I try to identify those main game trails and also intersections where deer travel from their bedding areas to the food source and to their water source and whatnot. So I employ quite a few trail cameras, even in like what I'll call a quarter section of property. I have 6 different trail cameras on that property. And it's so funny that I will have cameras on one trail and 30 yards over on another trail, I'll put up another camera and the same animal won't use both trails. I get completely different animals on a trail that is such a close distance away. So part of my passion for trail cameras is to pattern deer, pattern game, see what's in the area so that I can hopefully get a chance to harvest a mature animal when the hunting season rolls around September 1st for the area that I hunt in. But also just to watch animals grow and develop in their habits over the spring. And I'm one of those guys that gets just as excited when I see a cow and calf moose and a doe and a fawn whitetail as I do when I get a big buck in velvet. So just capturing all those moments outdoors, it brings me happiness, and that's why I do it. So yeah.
So, in particular to what we're talking about today, and that is a very successful hunt that you had, you started noticing this one particular deer when?
So the first time I have him on camera was actually last year, and I believe it was in June of 2023. So I'm kind of a nerd like that when it comes to trail cameras. I bring them home. I have an external hard drive that has a whole bunch of folders in it, and it has names of the deers. I have to identify them somehow. So I file them and I look at them. And once I was successful on this deer, I went back and I'm like, man, this is the one. And I know I've seen him lots this year, but I wanted to find how early it was that I actually noticed him. And the earliest video I can find is at the beginning of the season last year.
So, leading up to the day that you were successful, were you seeing this deer on the trail cameras? Were you still checking the cameras up to, maybe even the day before that you decided to venture in?
Yeah, so I use a combination. Obviously, the new thing right now is the cellular cameras, where you can have those up in the woods, and they're going to send you a picture to your phone, and you don't have to leave a footprint in there. So it's less pressure that you're putting in. So I do a combination of a couple cell cameras, but I still have a couple more than a couple, a whole tote full of old style cameras that take the SD card. So what I did is probably about that 23rd of August, I went for the last time and I let everything sit without any pressure, without any disruption, kind of for as long as I can in September. So as I hunt different areas, I collect the intel from those cards, right? And I make sure I don't go traveling all through the woods and making noise and disrupting everything and leaving my human footprint, my scent in there, because as we know, animals are smart. If some people walk down the wrong trail and they have the wrong scent on their boot, man, they take a different trail and you change their pattern. So as I collect that intel, I use that to go to different spots. And I have spots that are closer to bedding areas. I got spots that are in game trails kind of in a thicker part of the bush, and I have field edge spots where they come out at night. So depending on the time of the year, depending what those trail cameras are providing me for intel, that's how I kind of set up my hunts in order to give myself that best possible chance and know where to be and at what time. So I go back to your question with, has this buck been coming out regularly? And that's part of the reason why I named him Basket Case, because although the antlers I always refer to as a basket, and he's kind of got a unique basket where they're kind of slanted in at a 45, and he's really tall. Basically what he was doing is he was making me a basket case. So I would review my trail camera footage and I'm like, I know what trail he comes out. I know what time he comes out. Yet every time I tried to set up to be successful, whether that was the time of day, whether that was which way the wind was blowing, he just never walked out. I have never seen this deer in person until the night that I ended up harvesting him.
So when you saw the deer, was it in the back of your mind, this is the deer, or were you just thinking, okay, it's a buck, it's a good size buck, it's got a nice rack on it. I'm committed. So were you emotionally calm enough? I mean, obviously you were, but I mean, what was going through your mind at that time? Was it just like any other deer that you're going to take a draw on?
Um, yes and no. So I didn't know. So it was a night, it was October 20th. It was one of those days where it was raining and it was kind of cold. It was supposed to turn into snow overnight. And to be honest with you, I had a few projects around the house that I could have been doing while it was raining, and I hummed and hawed, and I actually texted the landowner and I said, how bad is it raining out? And they answered with, not too bad. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to grab my rain jacket and I'm going to come out. So realistically, I'm standing there and I left my gloves and my mask and my other jacket because this was the first time of the year that I used my rain jacket. And going through my head, it was about 15 minutes before dark. And I thought, man, my hands are going to be cold walking out. Maybe I'll strap my bow to my backpack. I'll keep my hands in my pockets walking out. And as I'm going through that thought process, I turn and I look, and 40 yards away, there's a buck. And I don't know which buck it is. It's a good buck. I know he's big and I can see him through the trees, but I cannot identify him yet. So during this time, it's a spot that I've hunted before, and I've actually missed deer from here before, Michael, where I didn't have my yardage set right. I hadn't practiced shooting my bow enough. I put so much time and effort into everything else that my shooting lacked, and I had missed. I had made errors from this spot before. So from the time I turned on my camera when I first saw him, and I thought about not turning on my camera because when I saw him, he was so close. I said to myself, you don't have time. Just get yourself ready. But I turned the camera on. I pivoted on my stand just so I could get my shooting lane. And I'm watching as he's walking. And I said, okay, this is a good deer. I'm taking a shot no matter what. But then the emotions start coming. The heart starts going. My breathing is really, really rapid. And I'm telling myself, I'm like, Geoff, breathe, remember your shot process, do everything that you need to do. So the deer gets to a point where he's just behind these little bluff of trees, and it's my last chance to draw back. So I draw back to full draw, and I have both of my eyes open. When I shoot my bow, I close my left eye so I can settle my pin on it. And I had both eyes open so I could get to position on his body pretty quickly once he came into my shooting lane. And as soon as he did, I just saw that split brow tine on his left side. And I was like, oh my God, it's him. Close the eye, let the shot go. And I mean, it turned out really, really good, but you're never quite sure, right? Like even after that shot was taken, I turned the camera around, and as you know, I share all my emotions, whether it's good, bad, happy, sad, that's just what I do. And I was like in shock, and I'm like, I think that's him, but I wasn't sure. I'm like, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not sure. So yeah, I knew I was going to take a shot if the shot presented itself. But I didn't know it was him until 3 seconds before I let that arrow fly.
There is one thing I do appreciate about you, and that is that you are an emotional fellow. You do tell it the way it is and the way you're feeling, and I think that's really genuine, and it certainly comes across in your videos. It wasn't the perfect shot. You did hit it a little bit back, but I love the way. I mean, you contained your emotions. You contained that I'm sure was tugging at you. I gotta go find this deer. And whether it was the deer or any deer, we all get kind of worked up and we want to make sure that, hey, it's down. But you really went through the process of waiting and then prepared to do the track in the dark.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. At least I've learned the hard way, which I learned most of my lessons that way. Where you think it's down, it's good. You go in, you bump it. I have bumped deer before. Earlier in my hunting career, I've bumped moose before where I didn't give it enough time with archery. And even on those perfect shots, sometimes you got to wait it out a little bit. So I knew the shot was good, but I didn't stop him. Like my eyes were open. Everything happens fast. I could have given it the old meh. So he stopped, but I didn't. So he was slightly quartering to me. And even though it was only at 20 yards, just that extra half second it takes for my arrow to get there and him walking gave it like 3 inches further than what I wanted. I mean, it definitely wasn't a bad shot. I knew it was a good shot. And with it being 15 minutes before dark, I waited kind of as long as I could. I walked in, I found the pool of blood right away, and I heard him. It wasn't a scamper. It sounded like he was maybe down and kicking, but with archery, as we know, you got to give it some time. And with, although I was cold before the shot, with the adrenaline going through me, I warmed up really quick, but I thought, let's go back to the truck. Let's warm up. Let's give it some time. And I think it was 6:32. It was the time that I had let the arrow fly. And I told myself as I'm waiting in the truck, wait till 8 o'clock and then go look for him. Well, at 7:45, I said, I gotta go. I gotta go. I can't wait anymore. It's an hour and 15 minutes. It should be good. So again, I was by myself this night, which I normally am. I grabbed my flashlight and I walked in and I found the pool of blood, and it was raining all afternoon and it had just kind of stopped. So the blood that I did find on the leaves was diluted, and it wasn't just your bright red, and it was mixed with water. But I knew he didn't go far, and 20 yards from where I saw the big pool of blood, that's where he was resting. And yeah, the rest is history.
So I guess the big question is, rinse, repeat for next season? Do you start setting up the cameras again and looking for the next basket case?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have so many great deer on this property, and I remember one of those interviews that you spoke about earlier in this interview. The question you asked me is like, "Has a trail camera ever helped you harvest one of your target animals?" And I looked at, and I'm like, "No, it just doesn't happen for me." And I mean, I would call it lucky, but in the same sense, I'm like, man, it's where preparedness and opportunity meet, and that's what happened. I knew he was in the area. Um, if it wasn't the deer that I was after, would I still have shot? Absolutely. If this was a mature deer, I would have shot. I'm looking to put meat in the freezer. So yeah, the next story, I don't know. I'm still setting out cameras. I was actually setting up trail cameras and pulling intel today. So my hunting partner hunts on that same piece of land, and he doesn't have his buck down yet this year. So it's such an exciting time, like with the rut and all the scrapes, and bucks are chasing does. And I pulled my cards and I reviewed them today, and I'm like, man, it's heating up. So even though I'm done hunting in that area for this year, I still get to be a part of it and help my hunting partner hopefully be successful with it. But yeah, the next story is only a few months away, and I'll look for those sheds come March, April. And when I find a good set, if I find a good set, I'll look for that next target deer on camera, and the quest continues.
Geoff, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations. And yeah, let's do something like this again real soon.
You betcha. Thanks a lot, Michael. Appreciate it.